Good evening and welcome to this remote meeting of Wirral Planning Committee. My name is Stuart Kelly and I'm the chair of the committee. This meeting will be webcast and a record retained on the council website. For those people at home who are viewing the webcast, if you look above the meeting, you will see a resources tab. Select this and the link to the agenda will appear on the right hand side. This will enable you to open the agenda report as PDF documents and follow the discussion. My role is to ensure that the committee runs smoothly, having regards to procedure, behaviour and ethics. To explain who are with us online, planning officers, a highway engineer and an environmental health officer. They will present the applications and provide any technical advice that may be required. The council solicitor. She will give advice to the committee on procedural and legal matters that may arise. There is also the minute taker and of course IT support. The elected members will consider the applications and collectively make the decisions. Voting will be by roll call. Each application will be introduced by the planning officers. Where there is a qualifying petition of 25 signatures or more, I will invite a representative of the petitioners to address the committee for 5 minutes. I will then invite the applicant or their agent to address the committee for 5 minutes. Statutory or local consultees may also address the committee. A ward councillor can also address the committee. Once representations have been made and following any questions of clarification from the committee, the speaker may not participate in any debate that follows within the committee. The application will then be open to debate and discussion by members of the planning committee, and we will then make a decision on the application. When making decisions, members may only have regard to material planning considerations. It is a matter for each member individually to balance these considerations and to decide what weight to give them. Members will also have regard to local planning policies and to the National Planning Policy Framework and Guidance. Members of the committee must not predetermine any matter which comes to the committee for decision. However, it is permissible for committee members to be predisposed towards a particular outcome with regards to an application, provided they don't make up their minds on how to vote before formally considering the application details, listening to the presentations and the full debate at committee. Members must have listened to the debate and considered all the facts before deciding whether or not to move any motion. If a member is minded to put a motion to the committee, it is good practice to first seek advice from the planning officer on the wording of a potential motion. A reminder for members, keep your microphone muted and your camera off until called to speak. Ensure that the chat function is accessible to you. Indicate you want to speak by typing your request into the chat function. Turn on your camera and microphone prior to speaking. Turn them off again when you have finished. When a vote is to be taken, the solicitor will call your name. I now need to just check that all members are present and their equipment is working correctly. When I call your name, could you turn on your camera and then your microphone and confirm, please? So, start with George Davies.
What the hell's happening here?
Well, we can certainly hear you, George.
Yes, okay, that's me, George Davies, present and correct.
Steve Foulkes.
Yes, Chair, present and correct.
Excellent. Samantha Frost.
Evening, Chair, present and correct.
Thank you. Andrew Gardner.
Good evening, Chair. Andrew Gardner here.
Thank you. Kathy Hodson.
Present and correct, Chair.
Mary Jordan.
Present and correct, Chair.
Brian Kelly.
Evening, Chair. Yeah, present. Everything's in order. Thank you.
Paul Stuart.
Good evening, Chair. Present.
Thank you. And Alison Wright.
Good evening, Chair. Present.
Okay, so we move to agenda item number 1, which are the minutes of the previous meeting. to approve the accuracy of the minutes held on the 12th of November. Hopefully they can be agreed if there's nothing anyone wishes to raise. That's fine. Agenda item 2 then. Members' Code of Conduct, Declarations of Interest. Members of the committee are asked whether they have any personal or prejudicial interest in connection with any item, with any application on this agenda, and if so, to declare them and to state the nature of the interest. Anything in the chat? Nothing. Okay, we move on then. Which is the application at Buffs Lane, Barnston. I will invite the planning officer to introduce the report, please. If Matthew's there.
I am, Chair.
Thank you.
Is the plan up?
The plan's up, yes, thanks.
Okay, so planning permission is sought for the erection of 3 detached dwellings to the rear of 11 Buffs Lane in Barnston. Each of the dwellings is 2-storey with garaging, off-road parking and private rear gardens. The area is characterised by a mix of 2-storey detached dwellings and bungalows in the area, as each property is different. Access to the development would be by way of a widened access and the provision of a private access road that will run parallel to the unadopted single track part of Buffs Lane that heads north towards Milner Road. No trees will be removed from the site, and trees neighbouring the site would not be affected by the development. Additional trees and landscaping will be brought forward with the proposed development. All separation distances are comfortably achieved, ensuring no overlooking or loss of privacy will occur. These distances take into account any difference in land levels, which are also secured by condition. Boundary landscaping also provides screening for properties that adjoin the site. In conclusion, the proposals have been amended since their first inception to take into account a number of concerns, especially with regards to highways elements of the development, which the local highway authority is now satisfied with. The site is located in the primarily residential area, within which new housing development is permitted. The proposals would not adversely impact on the character or the appearance of the area, and the application is recommended for approval. There is a qualifying petition of objection.
Okay, thanks for that. So we have a petition and the lead petitioner is present with us. So Mr. Hold on.
Pilcher it is, Chair.
Sorry, yes, Paul Moss. So Mr. Pilcher, if you could turn on your camera and microphone.
Hi, have you got me now?
Yep, got you now.
Great.
Mr. Pitcher, you're the lead petitioner. You have 5 minutes to address us, after which I'll ask if any members have any questions of clarification. So you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Can I just ask, I was expecting Mr. Peter Watson to join, but I can't see him. Can you just confirm if Mr. Watson is on the line, please? If not, I will just try and cover in more detail. Okay. In that case, I will take more time. We had agreed to split some time. So if, with your permission, I've got some slides I'd like to put up to walk through.
Okay.
Please let me know when you can see my screen. Can you see them? I hope this isn't my 5 minutes.
Are they Are they an emailable format? You can email them to me and I can show them for. Oh, they're on there.
Have you've got it now? Great, thank you. Okay, so thank you for your patience on there.
No problem. Are you all set up and ready to be timed?
I am.
Okay, so you have 5 minutes.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. As I mentioned, I was going to share the time with Mr. Watson. Obviously, for whatever reason, that's not going to be possible, so I will try and cover some more detail. But in brief, there are around 30 objections to this planning application. So obviously to try and cover all 30 in 5 minutes is not really going to be possible. So what I'm trying to do is summarize and to try and get into detail around some specific points. So from the resident's point of view, the main reasons for concern are overlooking and loss of privacy, including shading and loss of daylight, the overbearing and out-of-scale character of the new properties, and obviously the relevant increased noise, disturbance and overdevelopment, which will be obviously brought about by adding 3 new properties to any piece of land. I'm going to focus, first of all, I've taken a screenshot of the submitted plans. Admittedly, I will agree that the bus lane piece has been amended on the new plans. I did this a little while ago, so I acknowledge that the routing is different, but the concept is still there. I've highlighted a few points, as you'll see, A, B, C, D, and E and F, which are where there are some relevant objections. Again, I will note that point B on the plan was updated yesterday evening. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to update it on here, just where there were missing properties that have now been added. There's also missing properties at point D and point C, which for whatever reason aren't on the plan. What I'm going to do first of all is focus on property A, which is actually my property where I'm sitting right now. So this is 12 Park Road. As you'll see from my rear garden, the elevation, and I know the planning officer, I forget your name, apologies, has mentioned the difference in elevation. There's a 15 feet difference.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the slides aren't moving from our perspective.
Okay.
So if you're speaking to slides, they actually haven't moved on from the header.
Okay. Can you see?
I can see now. Yeah,
okay, yeah. I think the presentation mode. Okay, well, I'm going to skip over that. That's the one I've talked about. This is the view from my garden. You'll see the fence at the back. That is the proposed building land, and there's a 15 feet elevation gap. The picture on the right is the view from Buffs Lane towards my property, and if you look over the green hedge in the middle there, you'll just see my roof line. So if I'm standing on the Buffs Lane site, my roof is at head height. Moving it to a slightly wider angle, this picture shows numbers 8, 10, 12 and 14 Park Road. If you imagine a 25, 30 foot tall building on the piece of land here, they will be dominated, they will be overlooked, and they will lose daylight. I don't know if any daylight assessment has been done. Certainly I've not seen one. A bit of historical context, which I know is historical context only. It's not necessarily material. But when the property at 11 Buffs Lane, where the site is, was originally built in 1967, the owner of the previous owner of my current property wrote to the planning officer to complain that the land, after permission had been granted, was artificially raised 4'6", and it's now held in with a brick retaining wall. He measured it as a 14 feet difference in the elevation. Again, relevant. My measurement's 15. He said 14. The planning officer replied, agreeing that the land had been substantially raised against the submitted plans. This should never have been allowed to happen in the first place, to give this disparity. If we add a 25 to 30 foot tall building on top of that, we're clearly going to be overlooked, dominated, and potentially be losing sunlight. Moving on to the character of the properties, they're clearly very attractive properties. There's no denying that. No issues around that whatsoever. But if we walk down Buffs Lane, which hopefully this will work, I wanted you to visit in person, but obviously times are as they are. This is 11 Clanmo. That's the property where the building site will be. This is a walk down Buffs Lane on Google Maps. As you will see, they are predominantly bungalows. And it's the same on the unadopted portion, which I can't take you down on Google Maps. This area is bungalow properties with, generally speaking, retired people living here. To put these type of buildings on the elevated piece of land, they will dominate and completely change the character. If building work has to be undertaken here, which is reasonable, then I personally would recommend moving towards bungalows and lower level properties rather than these dominating large buildings. There's also concern from residents around rights of drainage, which is existing on the land currently. There's restricted covenants on the land currently, which again, I understand are not necessarily for planning, but these are concerns that have been raised by other residents. I believe personally that before you can move forward and make a true decision, there are some open questions which certainly from a resident's point of view we would like answering, in terms of what are the impacts of the revised routing, which we've acknowledged has happened. Does that change the location of the properties? Are they going to move in relation to Park Road closer to them and therefore potentially modify the light and the access from that point of view and the overlooking? What are the actual building heights and the elevations? It's difficult to see from the plan. How tall are these structures going to be? And again, what's the shadowing effect going to be? Previously, councillors have been round. I've actually given them a tour of Buffs Lane, and they've agreed with me at that point that properties of this nature weren't in keeping and it would be too dense, and they actually proposed alternatively bungalows as an option. And finally, correspondence that I've got from one of the councillors had Mr. Wood, the planning officer, involved, and who said, quote, "This application is some way off yet in agreeing design and layout. Other than the addition of the road, which again is acknowledged, we haven't seen any updates. To us, they look the same as they were when these original objections were raised." So I completely appreciate that working under COVID has been very, very difficult. I've personally been at home for 9 months, but we do feel as the residents here that this process hasn't been particularly transparent and fair. We've not been given fair right and fair scrutiny of the plans. So in summary, I would personally request that if the committee decides you need to make an approval on this land, I would recommend first of all a site visit to get your own understanding of the disparity in the elevation and the impact that tall buildings will have. And then if you do determine that you need to make this permission, I would suggest it goes for bungalows rather than large 4-bedroom buildings of this type.
Okay. That's the time is up. I did allow a little bit extra because of the interruption.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'm just going to ask if any members of the committee have any questions of clarification they wish to put to Mr. Pilcher. No, nothing in the chat. Mr. Pilcher, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you for listening.
Okay. We don't.
Sorry, could I ask for Mr. Pilcher to take down his slides as well from the screen? Thank you.
Sure. I will stop sharing.
Okay, we don't have the applicant with us, do we? And we don't have a ward councillor that wishes to speak. So a couple of issues there that I will ask the engineers to come back on or to clarify. Certainly, I think the petitioners acknowledge the issue of the covenant is not a planning matter. By law, we can't have regard to that. It'll be a matter for whoever has the benefit of the covenant and the landowners. In terms of the wall, the retaining wall, that clearly would be a matter for building regulations. As again, is a different process. We can't get involved in those. But there were some questions there then on light. I think one of the drawings, Matthew might want to put it up again. It orientates north, so it will show you where the path of the sun in the southern hemisphere will pass. Matthew might want to refer to that. And in terms of overbearing, obviously we're guided by our policies on separation distances so far as that is concerned. So if I can invite the case officers to come back on the issue of the height difference, the land level differences and the separation distances, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Hopefully that plan is now back up.
Yes, we can see that plan.
Yep. So this is the orientation of the site. So as you know, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So the sun will move in this direction. So for the majority of the day, these properties will not be shaded by the new proposed dwellings. It would only be later in the evening as the sun moves round to this direction and starts to set. The site is elevated above the properties that front onto Park Road, and members will be aware that there is a condition. It's the last condition on your agenda papers that deals with levels across the site, including ridge heights and finished floor levels. But if I could just point out that the the separation distances, the minimum separation distance that we would look to achieve would be 22 metres, and the distance from the rear elevation of these new properties to the rear elevations of the properties that front onto Park Road are between 28 and 30 metres. So taking into account the difference in land levels, we're satisfied that the separation distances comfortably will avoid any significant overlooking or loss of privacy. Also, in this part of the site, there is already significant tree screening. I think the petitioner made reference. He showed you looking down Buffs Lane that the properties in Buffs Lane were single story or bungalows. I think what he didn't show you was the top of Buffs Lane, which is this property here and this property here, and I'll just show you those. You can just see that they are in fact two-storey dwellings. So there are two-storey dwellings in the area, and there is also a two-storey dwelling on Buffs Lane together with dormer bungalows. And as I said in my presentation, the character of the area isn't defined by one single type of dwelling. So all in all, we're satisfied that with the conditions that are on your agenda papers and the amendments that have been made to the scheme, that the scheme is satisfactory in that regard. I don't know if Carl wants to come in on the access arrangements.
Okay, Carl.
Good evening, Chair. Yeah, so the amended scheme has a separate shared access to the proposed three dwellings from the surface section of Buffs Lane, and that is considered to be appropriate and removes our initial concerns of an increase in intensification of vehicles using the northern section of Buffs Lane to access the site. The proposed access onto Buffs Lane would be a vehicle crossover similar to any driveway which accesses onto the adopted highway. The proposed arrangement is unlikely to generate additional traffic along the public bridleway which runs alongside the development boundary, and it is considered that the proposed access is positioned so as to promote travel to and from the dwellings using the regular surface road, and there is also sufficient turning provision within the curtilage allowing vehicles to enter and leave in a forward gear out onto Buffs Lane. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Carl. I'm going to ask Mr. Pilcher, if you could turn your camera off, please, that'd be great. Thank you very much. Kathy, you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Initially, I had some concerns with this development over the road, Buffs Lane, which is a single track. And my first thought was that a development of houses that was going to go down Buffs Lane onto Milner Road, two things, it would be almost, well, you couldn't have two vehicles passing each other. And secondly, the turning at Milner Road is very tight, and I think that would have been a bit of a no-no, very dangerous. Once these new plans came with a private road from Buffs Lane to the top where it meets Park Road, I was quite happy with that access because it means that the main part of Buffs Lane, which is unadopted, doesn't need to be used at all. And so there'll be no problems with going out onto Milner Road because there will be no reason to. The only thing that I do have a problem with is not the development on the land, because the land is for residential use, but the fact that they are two-storey houses when, although as Matthew has rightly pointed out on the plans, the houses to the left of the site at the top of Buffs Lane where it meets Park Road are houses. Those houses that the petitioner lives in on Park Avenue are all bungalows, some of them dormer bungalows. I would have preferred if this development had been bungalows or even dormer bungalows. I know the separation distances are met, but Matthew, I'm not sure how to proceed on this one, because it could be argued that that the houses are uncharacteristic in the area because those that will be directly affected in effect on Park Road 8, 10, 12 and 14 are bungalows and some dormer bungalows, but they're not actually houses. And although the land levels and the separation distances have been taken into account, sometimes it's very difficult until these buildings are actually in situ to get the impact that it would be from people in their back gardens in Park Avenue looking up. Sometimes I think it would be nice if we could have at the planning committee sort of computer aided diagrams that would show the effect from the houses that would be specifically affected by a development. And most of us, it's difficult to think about if it was our garden, what the impact would be of a house. How tall are the houses, Matthew? I mean, the applicant's saying that the 15-foot wall and sort of 27 feet means it would be 42 foot up in the air. And it's difficult to think about what that effect would be if you're in somebody's garden and you're looking at that in terms of, how far in the distance would that, affect. Will the land that is being built on, will that be excavated so that the level of the houses will be lower? So sort of slightly sunk, if you like. I'll stop there and let you reply, and I'll go off camera while you do.
Okay. So through you, Chair, the height of the dwellings to the ridge is 8.2 metres, and plot 1 sits slightly lower than plots 2 and 3. The condition, it's as I've referred to it before, the last condition on the agenda papers. Let me just get it. It's condition 13. Requires details of finished floor levels and ridge and eaves heights to be submitted to us before any construction work commences. But notwithstanding that condition, we are satisfied that the separation distances in this instance are significant. And if I could just pick up on the point that you were raising about character of the area, I think it would be very difficult for us to sustain a reason for refusal based on character of the area, because there isn't a defined character in that area. As I pointed out, there are bungalows, there are dormer bungalows, there are two-storey dwellings in and around the immediate vicinity. So it would be very difficult for us to argue that there is a defined characteristic in that particular area, but hopefully that's picked up on the initial questions that Councillor Hodson has asked.
Yeah, thank you for that, Matthew. I think condition 13 is a particularly pertinent one for this application, and so that's all I've got to say on that one. I mean, the whole idea obviously is that it is the piece of land it is going to be built on. It's a residential area. We all want to preserve our green belt, and so to some extent, unless we use infills on pieces of land like this, people would not want us to encroach onto green belt by leaving pieces of land that are designed as plots of land to be used for residential use are left vacant. Thanks for that, Matthew.
Thanks, Kathy. Steve Foulkes. Are you there, Steve?
Yeah, I'm trying to be there. Right, so hopefully I'm here now. Yeah, I mean, clearly the first question was the designation of the land, and the designation of the land is primarily residential. Now, I can understand the objectives and the petitioners. I've enjoyed the nice open aspect of that piece of land for some considerable time, and personally, if I lived in that area, I would do what I could to protect it. But the first material consideration for planning committee is the intended use, and it has been the intended use of that land, although it's not been used for that, to be primarily residential. So that more or less begins the sort of sequential, why should we say no? And I'm finding it very difficult to say no, because I do know this is a fairly protracted application. I think the objector spoke briefly saying it seems to have been rushed, or it's rushed towards the end. It's been a very long application, because I know I was contacted about it quite a while back. Main issue was the highways issue, and indeed I think the density has been reduced from the original intention of the application. So I think it's been well thought out to the best of the applicants, and certainly the planning officers and the highways officers coming together to find a solution for the site. So I take on board all that's been said. I've been down that site to have a look. I always try to go and visit them, and it is quite a pleasant aspect that they've enjoyed for some years. However, picking up on Cllr's point, it is not greenbelt, it's not designated open space, it's not an SSI. It is what it is, a land for development, and I think it's been done sympathetically, given that in mind. So my view would, unless someone pulls something extremely different out of the hat during the committee, I'd be inclined to approve.
So, any other members wish to make contribution? No? Okay, well, the issue about can we put two on the site, can we put bungalows on the site, we're charged in a way only to consider the application that we have in front of us. We have no powers to alter it to something that we may or may not consider more appropriate. And we're charged with considering the application based on the land designation, which has been mentioned, and other material planning policies. The key one, I think, given the objections that are outstanding, is the one of height and overdevelopment. I think it is difficult to sustain arguments of overdevelopment. The density appears to be very similar to the existing houses on Park Road, and in terms of the height, Kathy makes a fair point. Lay people like us, some drawings that give a little bit more information aren't beyond the wit of architects these days, and hopefully we can start to ask for that sort of thing from architects. But up to now, we normally take the separation distance as the guide as to whether it will be overbearing or dominant to neighbours, and we've heard that all the separation distances are met, and at the end of the day that's what any external inspector would come and say, well, if your separation distances are met, what's the problem? And I'm not identifying it with this. Clearly some work has been done. I understand it started as 4 houses down to 3. 4 might have been too many. Certainly wouldn't match the density of the area, and the access arrangements up the path there, even notwithstanding that path seems to serve at least 2 and possibly 3 other dwellings. It probably would have been unsatisfactory to have added 3 more onto a bridle path, but that has successfully been overcome with the private drive just set back. I can't justify any reasons for refusal. It seems to fit into the area reasonably well from my perspective. I'll move approval. That hasn't been said. If anybody wants to pop their mic on and camera and second that would be, or alternatively move something else. Yeah, I think you've got to say it, Steve or Brian. I think the solicitor sulks at me.
I'm happy to second it, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Brian. No other contributions. If we can, prepare to vote. Is George Davies back with us?
I am. I've just got back in at 27 minutes past 6.
You've just got back in. The solicitor will call your name in any event, George, but you probably just need to indicate that unfortunately you didn't hear all of the discussion on that one.
I will.
Okay, so is that okay? So for members, voting will be for, against or abstaining on the motion, which is to approve. The solicitor will call your name. Please turn on your camera and microphone and say who you are before voting. Members should only cast a vote if they have heard the planning officer's presentation and the debate in relation to this matter in full and have not had any technical difficulties during this item. In the event that you have had problems hearing the discussion, you should not vote and indicate not voting when called. I'll hand over to the solicitors for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. So, just for the public to know that this was moved by Councillor Kelly and seconded by Councillor Kenny. So if I can call on Councillor George Davies.
Yes, please, if you don't mind. I lost contact just after the start of the meeting and did not get back on until 27 minutes past 6. So therefore I have not heard and therefore I will not vote on this.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. If I can call on Councillor Foulkes.
Councillor Steve Foulkes voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Councillor Sam Frost voting for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
Councillor Gardner for.
Thank you. Councillor Hodson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Stuart Kelly, for.
Thank you. Councillor Kenny.
Councillor Brian Kenny for.
Thank you. Councillor Stuart.
Councillor Paul Stuart for.
Thank you. And Councillor Wright.
Councillor Alison Wright for.
Thank you. That's 9 for and 1 not voting, Chair.
One voting, thank you. That application has been approved. We now move on then to agenda item number 4, which is the application of Albion Street at New Brighton. And I'll ask the plan officers to introduce their report, please. Matthew still with us?
I am. I'm just trying to get the plans up for this one. Here we go. Right. Are they showing now? Yeah.
They're on now. Thanks.
Okay. So this application seeks planning permission for the change of use of a guest house to a 12-bedroomed large house in multiple occupation. So the plans up on the screen at the moment show the existing guest house, which provides for 12 bedrooms, only 5 of which come with ensuite facilities. So the change of use. So these are the floor plans for the proposed change of use. So all 12 bedrooms will be with ensuite bathrooms, and kitchens are provided on the ground and first floor. Planning permission has also previously been approved by Planning Committee back in 2011 for the use of this building as a 13-bedroomed house in multiple occupation. That approved scheme provided a lesser quality of accommodation than the scheme now being brought forward. There's been no change in development plan policies since that 2011 approval, and there has been no material change in the character of the site or its surroundings, which would make resisting this current improved proposal difficult to robustly defend. The site is located within close proximity of New Brighton railway station and is also well served by bus routes. Highways have also confirmed that there is spare capacity for on-street parking in the vicinity of the proposal. It's unlikely that the use as a 12-bedroomed HMO will result in an increase in traffic from that generated by the current use as a 12-bedroomed guest house. In fact, it could be argued that the guest house is likely to result in more transient movements with people visiting for shorter periods of time. In conclusion, it's considered that the proposal offers affordable accommodation in a highly sustainable location that will not result in any significant harm to the amenities or the character of the area and is in accordance with the approved development plan. The application is recommended for approval, and again there is a qualifying petition of objection.
Okay. Okay, so Mr. Martin, do we have Paul Martin?
Evening. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and now I can see you, Mr. Martin. Okay, you're the lead petitioner on this. You can address us now for 5 minutes, after which I'll ask if any members have any questions of clarification for you. So you have 5 minutes.
Thanks, Chair, for allowing me to speak this evening. I'll be brief, I promise. I won't take the 5 minutes. I'm speaking in my capacity as a local resident, as someone that's offered affordable housing for most of my work and life, but more importantly, as lead petitioner, feeding back the concerns of over 30 residents of this area, close to the planned conversion, many of whom live in Albion Street itself. I take huge interest in housing locally, and I understand that there is a huge undersupply of fit-for-purpose, good quality housing across the Wirral. Indeed, I've been keen to support any initiative that helps to attract residents into parts of the borough where they can seamlessly settle into communities around them and develop a sense of belonging and civic pride along the way. I believe, though, unfortunately, that this plan does not do any of this. Now, I understand the financial incentives around this kind of accommodation. Rental yields can often be 300% of what you'd expect on a standard buy-to-let investment. And you could argue that there is a place for HMOs, albeit it's not for me to present one way or another tonight. You can, though, have too many in a concentrated area, and one material change from last time was that an HMO has since been approved in Gayton Avenue, just around the corner. And I believe that it puts New Brighton at risk of setting a precedent of becoming Wirral's HMO capital. Huge plans afoot from last time. Now, residents that I've spoken to have included those worried about potential car parking issues in an already congested road. If you just walk down Albion Street, you will see that there are many cars up and down there parked up. There's one car parking space outside there, but supposedly this is going to be for up to 12 residents, so it's clear that further congestion could be brought to the area. An area's residents will tell me all I need to know about how the feeling is toward this proposal. So my brevity in speaking is very deliberate, because the names and the comments on the petition should say everything about the legitimate concerns over safety, congestion and perceptions of antisocial behaviour amongst the many items noted on the petition, and it's for this reason I ask that the application is rejected. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'll just ask if any members of the committee have any questions of clarification they wish to put to petitioners. Nothing there. Okay. Mr. Martin, thank you very much for your presentation. We don't have the developer, do we? No. But we do have a ward councillor, Councillor Jones. Steve, will that question wait until the ward councillor has spoken?
It's advice of the solicitor until I realised who the objector speaking was. He is known to me, and he's probably known to most of the members of the Labour Party. But I wouldn't class him as a friend. Well, I do class all my fellow party members as friends, unlike the Conservative group. But it's a dilemma for me because until his face appeared, Paul Martin could have been anybody. So, and my other colleagues will have maybe have to wrestle with this one.
I will ask Cecilia then. Yes, it's.
Yeah. I think if this is something that applies to all members of a particular political group, it's not an issue that would be where you would have them as a close personal friend. It's, as always, declarations of interest are up to the individual member to consider, but certainly as a fellow member of a political group or, a political party, that wouldn't be something that was close enough to have to declare, to remove yourself from the meeting. Although that will be noted that you have indicated that you do know him.
Okay.
Through
so
that one.
I think that will have to go for all the members of the Labour group on the planning committee. Can we submit that personal interest on all their behalf then? And we will stay and we will vote based on that advice.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. So I'll call again for Councillor Jones if he's still here. Is he still here? Yes, he is. Tony.
Good evening, Chair, councillors, officers. I'm Councillor Tony Jones, representing the residents of my ward, especially the folks in Albion Street, Gayton Avenue, along with those in Foul Road. In addition to those, folks whose details appear on the petition already submitted in relation to application 20-01151, some 30 plus signatories in number. I would wish to make the following comments and observations, some of which are mine and some of which are from residents that would be affected by this HMO if it's passed. I would wish to make the following comments and observations. 12 proposed bedrooms in an HMO. Is it really acceptable that such a concentrated number of people live in conditions that one resident has described as just an opportunity to maximise income from one building? Insufficient internal space for the expected number of residents. Again, another resident who signed a petition actually likened to the conditions as being human rabbit hutches. One car parking space for multiple residents on an already congested road. Ask any Albion Street resident or Gayton Avenue resident or Foul Road resident about the situation regarding traffic on those three roads in the immediate vicinity. Multiple use kitchens and one dining area. The development's not in keeping with the character of the area, and it's located opposite a Grade 2 listed building that's extensively used. There is already an HMO in Gayton Avenue that the lead petitioners already alluded to, but it's only a couple of doors down from this application. That, whether we like it or not, fundamentally changes the character of the area should this application be granted. I note that there are no objections from environmental health and our highways engineers, but with the greatest of respect, those folks don't have to live in the area if permission is granted for this HMO. As a local authority, we've invested millions in New Brighton and continue to attract developers and other businesses, actually as I speak. Does this development really send out the right signals to other potential developers in their quest to enhance the area and the resort? I think not. In conclusion, can I urge the committee to reject this application, and thank you for your time and thank you for listening.
Thanks for that, Tony. Does any members of the committee have any questions, clarification they wish to put to the ward councillor? No. Okay. I wonder if I can ask the case officer, the plan officers, just to brief us on the issue of concentration of HMOs, in the sense of what is our policy so far as concentration of HMOs is concerned, and just confirm in terms of what Councillor Jones raised about the internal space standards for us. I think they're the two things that I'm interested in, particularly concentration of HMOs.
Yep, thank you through you, Chair. If I can refer members to paragraphs 3.8.2 through to 3.8.4, which are on pages 17 and 18 of your report. So policy HS14 seeks to avoid a concentration of HMOs in a particular area, so that they do not compromise more than 20% of the properties forming a street frontage within any particular block. So those paragraphs have gone on to highlight for members that we've looked at the public register of HMO licensed properties within 200 metre radius of the site, and we've assessed those existing HMOs in the area, and that there's less than 20% of properties within this particular block or this area that are made up of HMOs. And so on the basis of what's set out in the policy, it couldn't be argued that this proposal would result in any particular concentration of HMOs in this area. In terms of the room sizes, they're all over the 10 square meters. That is the minimum that we would look to achieve, and on top of that, each of the 12 bedrooms has got their own ensuite bathroom facilities. So on that basis, we're satisfied that this is a satisfactory proposal.
Could just ask, I'm looking at the paragraphs on what's picked up. Reference was made to HMO just round the corner in Gayton Avenue. I assume that one has fewer than 5 occupants then, because it's not picked up on the...
That's right, Chair. So the mandatory register from it doesn't pick up for anything that's less than 5 or less occupants, as it says in 3.8.3. But notwithstanding that, we're still satisfied that there aren't so many HMOs in that particular area that it would result in an over-concentration.
Okay. Any questions or comments from members then? Open to the committee. Kathy, thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. I have to say, when I saw this application coming to committee and all of them having ensuite bathrooms, I was particularly pleased. It was only the last one that we had one where most of the bedrooms had ensuite facilities bar 2, which we passed, and we've all, I think, been of the opinion on the committee that we would like to see going forward HMOs with ensuite facilities for everybody. So having looked at the plans with the 2 kitchens, lounge, ensuite facilities, decent sized bedrooms, particularly on the second floor. I think there's something like 17 square metres and 24 square metres on the second floor. There are 12 cycle provisions. It is near a railway and bus transport. I don't think it's reasonable to assume that everybody will have a car. I mean, apart from the fact, looking at green agendas and that sort of thing, that the move is for people not to necessarily have a car. And to be fair, I think most people, if they didn't need one, probably wouldn't. They're not cheap to run. And so I think if you can get away with living in accommodation where you can get to wherever you want to go on public transport or on a bike or walking, I mean, why wouldn't you? So for me, the fact that there is only one parking space is not detrimental to the application. I don't think it's fair to demonise potential residents of these buildings, because it may very well be that people want to move for the first time out of a family situation where either they're not happy or it's overcrowded, or they have issues, and so they want to have some private space, and the first port of call on the first rung of any ladder may very well be being in an HMO where you've got a bedroom, decent size, and an ensuite, and you've got facilities for kitchen and lounge. And so I'm quite happy with this application, and I hope that other applications for HMOs that come before us in the future pay as much consideration as this seems to, for making sure that people have adequate facilities for this type of development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kath. There's a number of members wish to speak. I'll take Steve Foulkes next, and Mary Jordan after. Steve Foulkes first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And can I congratulate both Tony Jones and Paul for their eloquence in defending what is an angst time for residents when they see the term HMO, and publicity around HMOs is sometimes good and sometimes bad. So you would imagine, you'd imagine local residents and their locally elected representatives to come to the planning committee, and hopefully the planning committee can explain why the policies exist as they do. However, I think there are some material considerations that we must consider. It's got permission already existing for a 13-bed HMO, which would still be deemed as current because none of the legislation has changed. So a slight improvement, certainly improvement in the internal layout, and it also has the previous permission as a guest house of 12 in number, 12 rooms in number. So I think both of those could equally be argued as being a worse option than the current application. And there's no change in policy, and I think we're going to have to get used to applications coming forward with low or minimal parking requirements, because the climate emergency, national planning guidance, and all the issues around that are steering us into that position where people will, the car will not necessarily be number one on the agenda in terms of planning. But I can understand, again, people who live in that area and may have experienced parking issues. I know a number of my members have been up to the site, and parking, there does seem some spare parking, but I guess depends what time of the day you go up there. But by and large, I think, given where we are as a planning committee and in sort of consistency reasons, this moves in the direction that we're trying to encourage, with the well above the 10.5 metre space for individual residents, and those issues in around ensuite. So I think I can understand residents' angst. I can understand the glory days of New Brighton, and there are lots of large properties there, and we must be ever vigilant that we don't destroy the character by allowing the same of one type of development going through. But given the officer's reply, it's not or anywhere near that level yet. A final sort of question, and it has been mentioned in some previous HMO applications, that the market that they are targeting is not what we would normally think normal HMO clients, but this issue of key workers, and the fact that we've had a number of applications where they're talking about key workers. So the world at large may see the Wirral as a place where key workers will need accommodation, because we've got a huge regeneration project in Birkenhead, and Tony mentioned the regeneration of New Brighton. Who knows what contracts Cllr may get. So was there any mention in the application or the paperwork behind it that they are targeting key workers as part of the plan? I don't know whether that is poignant to be discussed at committee, but I would ask that question along with my comments. Thank you, Chair, for indulging me.
Thanks, Steve. Matthew, I think I'd had a look at the business plan that was put onto the or submitted with the paperwork, it seemed to Steve Foulkes seems to be right that that they did appear to have a business plan. Perhaps a good comment on that in answer to Steve. And also in terms of the previous the previous permission, that was a 2011 permission. I assume that's now lapsed. In fact, has it, or is that still a good permission that could actually they could just go ahead and implement?
No, through you, Chair. Yes, you're right. The 2011 permission for the 13-bedroomed HMO that would have lapsed after 3 years. So, although it's a lapsed permission, it is still a material consideration when you're looking at planning applications. And you're right. There is a business plan that's been submitted with the application. That isn't really a material planning consideration in the sense that it governs the application, and as members know, occupancy isn't really a material planning consideration either. But I think in the direction of travel that the council is looking to go in terms of HMOs, I think it's good to see that there is a business plan around how the premises will be managed moving forward.
Thank you. Mary Jordan.
Thank you, Chair. At last, I'm pleased to see an application which has all en suite. It makes a pleasant change. I have a question for Matthew. I noticed on the plans that there's a removal of fire escape. Have the fire authority made any comment on this? And is there likely to be any sort of building regulations that cover this? Because I'm just concerned that there would be no means of escape from the upper stories if a fire were to break out.
Again, thank you through you, Chair. So the Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service issued their what we call standing advice, and most of that is in relation to building regulations, and the fire escape issue would be covered by building regs, which is outside of the remit of the planning application, but it is something that would be covered by building regs, and I would imagine through the licensing. The enforcement of the licensing regime as well.
Okay, Brian Kelly.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I've read all the relevant documentation concerning this application, and I've listened very carefully to both the lead petitioner and the local councillor in the comments they made. Now, from listening to what the planning officer has said, in a nutshell, what I'd like to ask, are you saying, Matthew, that there are no sound planning reasons why the planning committee could reject this application? And to follow that through, if the planning committee tonight were to reject this application, in your opinion, what would the likelihood be if the applicants decided to submit an appeal? In your opinion, would they be likely to succeed or not in submitting any appeal if the planning committee rejected the application? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you through you, Chair. So I'm not here to direct the committee. Obviously, I'm only here to advise you. But in my opinion, the fact that there has been a recent permission back in 2011 for a 13-bedroomed HMO on this site is significant, and it is a material consideration. There has been no change in the development plan since that permission was granted, and there has been no change in the character of the area since that permission was granted either. So you would have to be satisfied that those two tests had been met, and in this instance they haven't. And I think also, as I mentioned in the presentation, and Councillor Foulkes picked up on it as well, that there's a 12-bedroomed guest house in place at the moment that's currently in use. So again, This is for no additional bedrooms on top of what's already in place. And it could be argued, I suppose, that a guest house by its nature will have many more visitors because they'll only be spending shorter periods of time there, whereas people living in an HMO are likely to be less transient in their nature. So my professional view and advice to officers is that if this were to end up at appeal, we would struggle to defend it robustly.
Okay, thanks for that. Paul Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it's no secret that I've had issues with HMOs in the past, and I appreciate that we've got to take every application in its own merit. But my issue has been predominantly ramming people in, as been described as rabbit hutches, with no facilities. And what I would say to members and to members of the public who are listening in to this is just look at the past applications that we've had to agree to, that I haven't been happy with, others may not have been happy with, but they got planning permission in any case. Places that didn't have shared facilities, that in my opinion can only be described as rabbit hutches. You're just ramming people into the smallest possible area. I don't see this property as being one of those. It is refreshing to actually see and proof that developers, landlords can still make money while still providing some dignity and reasonable accommodation. You know, let's not be under any illusion that, you know, no private landlord or private developer is going to be producing a HMO out of the goodness of their heart. They are doing it to income maximise, absolutely. But in my opinion, they can and should do it in a reasonable way that is not just about ramming people in to get as much as they can, but giving a bit of dignity to people for whatever reason that they may need this kind of property. No one can say who will be the dictate what type of tenants they will be. Everyone has a right to a home. Everyone has a right to a roof over their head. And I just see that what our role here should be is to make sure that that is of reasonable and good standards. And I think that this application does meet that criteria, and I hope that any developers who may be watching this or take an interest in planning, who've got plans to come forward with more HMOs, will actually look at developments like this and see that there is a minimum standard that everyone should aspire to. And with regards to concentration, there's higher concentration of HMOs in other wards than there is here. So yeah, I find it difficult based on what's been said tonight and what has been said by Mr. Parry Davies with regards to the legal grounds of us refusing this. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Andrew Gardner.
Thank you, Chair. I can echo Councillor Stuart's sentiments there, actually, that this is, you know, this is a good scheme to be an exemplar for developers who want to bring this sort of housing forward. Not that we particularly like it. I don't particularly like this type of housing, but if we're going to have it and we have to have it, and it has a need and there's a need to satisfy, then you know, this is, I think, how to do it. But there's just a question for Matthew, and he's touched on it a couple of times about the previous permission. Now, of course, that's made under the UDP, which is now, we all know, is horrendously out of date, and we still haven't got our local plan, and one of the last in the country not to have a local plan. But I do agree with the petitioner and Councillor Jones that, you know, New Brighton has improved greatly in that time of the UDP, perhaps not so much since 2011, but I'm just wondering, is there any material weight on the incoming local plan that is, you know, does have weight on this application at this point?
Sorry, through you, Chair. Not at this point, no. The new emerging local plan carries a very limited weight until we get to the to the next stage, really, the sort of Regulation 19 areas and beyond. But at this point in time, it carries limited weight for determining applications.
Okay, and is there anything in that plan that, you know, is a different circumstance to the UDP for this area? That's my point. You know, has the area changed?
Well, obviously the UDP, the local plan will be a new document, and it will reflect the changes that have already taken place in the past. But it's about securing development for the future, really, and making sure that we have the right sort of development in the right areas. So this will carry us through to the next few years.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Matthew.
Okay. Thanks for that. I think that's covered the ground. Yes, I agree entirely with what Andrew and Paul have said. I'd like to think that that the planning committee's angst on having to approve or even refuse application for HMOs that don't have ensuite and sufficient space is beginning to filter through to developers. I like to think that. Whether it's true, I don't know, but certainly other market signals are beginning to result in applications with ensuite facilities, and that's been a big bugbear, I know, of the committee when we've been considering HMOs. And in terms of appeals, Brian asked the question, you know, we've turned down HMOs on the grounds that we didn't feel there were enough baths or toilet facilities, and some inspectors have agreed with us and some inspectors have not. So it's a difficult question to put to anybody. What will the inspector say if we were to turn it down? Well, there is no reason for us to turn it down. As has been said, that there are ensuite facilities, whether the rabbit hut size or not, there are policy compliant room sizes within it. And one of the other benefits, the reference was made to the previous planning application, which I took time to look up, from 2011. It might have expired, but at the end of the day, if they put in exactly the same application as they put in 2011, which was approved, we would still have difficulty turning it down, despite the fact it had no ensuite facilities. So based on the 2011 scheme, this is a vast improvement. We've also had advice on the issue of concentration of HMOs, and this one, being a larger HMO, will also benefit from licensing. And it's very rare that we see in the paperwork, you know, a business plan about how they're planning to manage it, and that certainly gave me a degree of confidence. So that being said, then I'll move approval of this application, and hopefully someone from the floor will second that.
I'll second, Chair. Kathy Hodson.
And no other members are indicating that they wish to speak further on that, so we'll move to voting. Voting will be for, against or abstaining on the motion, which is to approve. The solicitor will call your name. Please turn on your camera and microphone and say who you are before voting. Members should only cast a vote if they have heard the planning officer's presentation and the debate in relation to this matter in full and have not had any technical difficulties during this item. In the event that you have had problems here in the discussion, you should not vote and indicate not voting when called.
Thank you, Chair. If I can call on Councillor Davies.
Councillor Davies, for.
Thank you. Councillor Foulkes.
Councillor Steve Foulkes, voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Councillor Sam Frost, voting for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
Councillor Andrew Gardner, voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Hodson.
Councillor Catherine Hodson, voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
Councillor Mary Jordan, voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Stuart Kelly, voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Kenny.
Councillor Brian Kenny, voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Stuart.
Councillor Paul Stewart voting for.
Thank you. And Councillor Wright.
Councillor Wright voting for.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's unanimous. That application has been approved. That concludes our agenda. I know that some members will be meeting next week for our inaugural subcommittee meeting, so I look forward to seeing you there. For those members that and officers who we won't see next week at the subcommittee, can I wish you and our viewers, our regular viewers, a